it's really interesting seeing the narrative progress when it comes to the Nintendo Switch releases of 2022, because that was a banger year for Nintendo. They put out nothing but stellar entries all year long, right? Like, it was an underrated year for the company, to be sure, but a lot of people, and I do mean a lot of them, religiously came out and tried to downplay all of it. This was, of course, around the 6 year mark for the Nintendo Switch console, and everybody was certain that the Switch 2 was on the horizon. Oh, I'm sorry, the Switch. What was it called then? It wasn't the Switch 2 then. They were calling it something else. Was that still in the Switch Pro era? Well, anyway, like people were certain the Switch was going to be replaced in the next couple of years. So as a result of that, a lot of Nintendo games were attacked, and like in really weird, unusual ways too. And I think the big blatant one for me is Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And one of the reasons I haven't talked a lot about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 because I'm not a Xenoblade fan. I can't really go into like the intricacies of the plot or the characters because I personally am not that much invested, okay? You know, I own Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I was thinking of like going back and streaming it this weekend because of what happened recently actually. But you know, I am not an expert on the lore, so I can't really come out and refute some of the crazy things that the community has come up with in the recent past. Although I have been heavily involved in like the Juniper is non-binary debate, right? Like I have been involved with that. She is not. I was very heavily involved in disproving that. Like I was able to demonstrate that it was a localization mistake, and that's kind of accepted outside of the circle that desperately wants to push it as canon. And I was completely unaware of another non-binary character in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, A, who I think is like another incarnation of Alvis or some shit, right? So people were coming out trying to refer to this character as non-binary. I'm not sure why. I'm sure there was like some localization issue or like someone tried pushing a narrative that wasn't there, or maybe they just made it up. But there was this very, very big push to try and push this character, who I believe is like plot critical for the future Redeem DLC. Like, there was this very big push to try and present this character as non binary. And uh, with the release of the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 art book in Japanese, which specifically refers to this character as a woman, that entire debate has gone up in smoke, right? I saw like a handful of people try and like downplay this and try to address it and try to damage control it, but the reality is that like it's very, very clear in black and white that the character is a woman, right? After all that fan wake, after all the edited wikis, after all like the narrative pushing, the reality, like the truth comes out. And I do think this is like um a thing that people are starting to catch on to when it comes to localization companies is how they try and push this weird narrative that wasn't there in the original Japanese, right? The they them shit. Like what seems to have happened with Juniper is that she is referred to differently by other characters because like of the role she plays in her colony, whatever. And so she has like a more formalized kind of persona, like a personality. So like I characters tend to like I think the it has something to do with the honorific system. That does seem to be the trend here because they keep referring to gods as they them, and like again, like there's a very clear pattern here that we keep seeing. Like Splatoon 3, they tried to give a female character oct they them pronouns, which is also incorrect. Like they keep doing this, but more and more people are catching on to the fact that they're doing it and are declaring it non-canon. They are declaring it to be not to be real, right? Like it doesn't matter what the localization companies try to pull, but the games themselves are clearly not pushing a woke agenda, right? Like it is entirely a localization issue that has become very apparent over the last couple of years, and now this is I think this has been demonstrated at this point several times over. It is the localization companies. Now, the thing is though, when it comes to Xenoblade Chronicles 3, the thing I've been aware of because of this narrative is that anti-woke activists have latched onto it and have tried fabricating a narrative out of whole cloth that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is an extremely censored RPG and that it is completely controlled by the woke activists, right? This game is pushing a woke agenda according to the raging golden eagles of the world, right? These guys are complete fucking retards and you shouldn't listen to them about in regards to any topic, right? But when it comes to Xenoblade Chronicles 3 specifically, like, again, these people don't know what they're talking about, right? They try to say the game is desexualized. It is. However, that isn't because it's to push a woke agenda. It's because of like the change in atmosphere and tone from the second game, right? These people in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 are clones that don't even know what sex is. Like not sexualizing the characters actually makes a whole lot of sense in that context, right? Like the fact that like people really have this mindset that like, oh, if you don't see a certain amount of character of skin on a character, that means it's woke. It's a complete crap and always has been, and I just don't see any reason to be upset at this game, and especially like these days where you're seeing more and more people like it's crazy, right? Seeing people like angrily try to convince you that like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is woke, it ruined this franchise just like Fire Emblem, when in reality these games are doing exceedingly well and they're doing a really good job. Honestly, like I just don't see any real problems with Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It's probably my favorite Xenoblade game, to be completely honest with you. So with that in mind, okay, with that in mind, like why exactly are we allowing this to happen over and over again when it comes to Nintendo games? You have legit, real talk games that have come out recently that are somehow controversial with both the base boys and the woke community, right? Somehow Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is woke and not woke at the same time. Like, how does this make any sense? Like, are you saying that like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 doesn't have a political message at all? Like, are you saying then that means it's not woke? Like it's really really weird seeing the back and forth in regards to these kind of situations. And of course, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is not the only example. Bayonetta 3 is I think the hallmark of what happened here with this agenda, where a bunch of YouTubers came out and disavowed the game because of how it treated like how it handled like the Bayonetta's love interest, Luca, right? Like, oh, nobody cares about Luca. Like, Bayonetta's always looking down on him. Like, her real lover is John. Like, they have a lesbian romance that has been ongoing for 500 years. Like, they would try like seriously convincing you of that, like completely ignoring like the reality of the situation. Like before Bayonetta 1, Bayonetta doesn't even know who Jean is. Like she lost her memory. Like the entire time she's flirting with Luca, right? But oh, she knew her 500 years ago. Yeah, and she was at the bottom of a lake for a long for like 500 years, right? She met Luca the instant she came out, and like she's been like she probably has a closer relationship with Luca than she does with Sean at this point. Because she was following him around for 20 years, right? So it's like okay, again, like you really do have this like you really do get the mind the idea looking at these people like trying to convince you that like, oh, Bayonetta was flirting with John in the first game, oh, 2 is a lesbian love story. Like you see them do this shit, and then you look at like the reality of the situation, and like you realize that none of this was true at all, and it's all just massive shipping goggles by people like trying to push an agenda. And when that agenda was shit on in the most spectacular way possible, in a way that's basically impossible to refute, they try to like cry about it and try to like make stuff up. I saw them do this with Bayonetta 3, where they came out and they tried to tell, in Japanese, Kamiya gave a Japanese interview where he claimed that in some universes, Bayonetta was with Jean. And those were the universes that the first 2 games took place in. And that was immediately proven to not be true. So they've kind of like backtracked a little bit and tried to say that like 3 was a retcon or something. Like I don't know what they're trying to pull now. Like I don't really pay much attention to it because it's kind of a niche thing. But like the issue is like it's very frustrating to me that the vast majority of discussion over these really great Nintendo games over the past couple of years is primarily regarding on whether they're based or woke. Like why is this such an issue? Like none of these games are woke. If anything, Bayonetta 3 and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 are both two of the most red-pilled games ever made. Bayonetta 3 shit all over lesbians, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 gave us, like, babies are awesome. Like, like, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 might be the most red-pilled game I've ever played. And you're seeing people, like, trying to argue that it's woke. No, fuck you. Fuck your community. Fuck your ideas, fuck your ideology. Like, you are complete scum. Like, this really, really needs to stop. And again, like this is like the anti-Nintendo agenda in motion. Like, you're somehow seeing Nintendo be woke and anti-woke at the same time, and yet somehow people aren't really addressing what's going on with the real controversies in games. Pow World, Tekken 8 having the battle pass, Baldur's Gate 3, like people still try to pretend Baldur's Gate 3 isn't woke at all, like Helldivers 2 people are shilling right now. Like, people will bend over backwards to defend anything that isn't a Nintendo product and will condemn everything Nintendo makes. And this is a very real, very observable pattern that you will see if you pay attention to enough Nintendo properties.